Rich people of Reddit who married someone significantly poorer. What surprised you about their previous way of life? Making financial decisions based around the 3-paycheck month. If you're paid every 2 weeks, most months you get 2 paychecks, and all of your monthly bills and budgeting is based on those 2 paychecks. But twice a year there are 3 pay days in a month, and that's when you can actually solve problems. That's when you can get the car registered, or fix the dryer, or get the cat spayed. The other 10 months you're doing maintenance and trying to cope. 3 paycheck months you can actually try to fix problems. I know this so well. Finally in a salaried position but on a tipped income, those 3 paycheck months were a serious lifesaver. More of a funny incident, but I was the poor one. My husband, at the time still boyfriend, took me out to a very nice restaurant. Waiter asked if I want pepper on my Caesar salad that was just made tableside. I said sure and he goes about it. Thing is, I didn't know you had to say stop. My husband slowly realizes this, but decides to see it play out. He did eventually say that I need to say stop. I just thought a Caesar was had this way as it was my first time even eating a salad that wasn't just iceberg and ranch dressing. It still tasted fine, just a little bit too much pepper, haha. I was adopted at age 7. I lived in extreme poverty and then all of a sudden I lived with a doctor who bought gifts for birthdays and Christmas. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know you could go to the store to get food. I just thought you went to the church and had to pray before they give you a bag of food. When the family had people over for dinner, if they ended the prayer before the meal with F.H.B. Amen, it was a signal to let the children know that they don't have enough food for everyone. So take smaller servings and let the guests get a regular serving. FHB equals family. Hold back. They were always generous to their friends and didn't let their lack of funds embarrass themselves when doing so. I grew up poor too, but we never had any guests round for dinner. FHB, my heart. Honestly, food insecurity. When we were first married she would get visibly uneasy if the food in the house was running low. She never overate or anything, she was just always concerned about it. A lot of times when she was younger, she went hungry. On the humorous side though, she hates camping. Her answer is always the same. I camped because it was fun. She camped because they couldn't afford hotels. She and her mother lived with her grandfather to not be homeless because her grandfather owned a house. She was putting community college payments on her credit card and building debt with it. I paid off her credit cards when we were dating and she cried from me being so nice. It was only like $1,300. I bought a condo, then we got married, then we bought a house. I never really considered myself rich until I started dating her and learned that a trip to Wendy's was a treat. I grew up middle class, and we are currently middle class. Hell. My wife was born and raised in the Soviet Union. She still goes crazy for fresh fruit like it's the most extravagant luxury. The prevailing mindset in his community growing up that insurance was something only rich people had. Not health insurance, mind you. Well, not just health insurance, auto insurance. Going without it was a way of life for most everyone he knew. My so has to constantly remind me that I can go to the doctor whenever I need to instead of just hoping I don't die. I am on the other side as I married a girl from a rich family, although we both earn the same and I tend to worry about money savings future. Through the years I have realized that she worries less about it and still saves more and spends less than me. I feel like coming from a lower middle class family makes me think about saving more, but at the same time I spend money on things as I could not have them all before I got my own job. I am so like this. I think and plan and budget, but when my paycheck comes it is so hard to not spend it all on going out to eat or other frivolous things because I could never have those small luxuries before. Sandwiches. When I made him a sandwich I only put one thin slice of meat in it. He couldn't believe that was how I had sandwiches growing up. Growing up, we weren't allowed to just eat deli slices. It had to go between 2 pieces of bread because that would fill you up faster and save on meat costs. I am not well off, but my stepfather is. I was raised by a single mom who spent money on everything and bills were always behind. She just couldn't manage her money at all. In her 50s she met and married a multi-millionaire. We are in middle America, so that goes further than maybe in a lot of areas. They have given themselves $10,000 a month budget to live on. living on interest, own their home. Anyway, once my mom met him and they got all her finance situated and paid off, she won't spend a penny. He spends like it is going out of style. He has actually begged me to take her shopping to get clothes and accessories. She won't do it. She spent more when she was a single mom with nothing. It makes no sense to me. At least buy a new outfit. She is heck bent to not use a penny of his money. They barely even have any groceries. If they have anything, it is because he buys it for them. She is a retired nurse that gets a retirement and SS, but she won't spend anything. She lives poorer now than any other time in her life. This sounds less like a financial issue and more like she's trying to preserve her pride. She knows that people will think she's a gold digger if she spends his money, so she's going to the opposite extreme and refusing to benefit from any of it. I didn't marry this woman, but when we started dating, she always wanted to chill at my place, never hers, which was fine. But she gained 35 pounds in just like a few months of dating. She was 100 pounds when we started dating. Not that it was a bad thing. 1. I am a chubby man, and 2. I was just glad she wasn't pregnant. Anyway, turns out her family couldn't afford dinner sometimes. So suddenly she had a place to eat every night and gorged herself. I know 2 siblings who were starved by their father for years until CPS took them away and placed them with their biological mother. From there, they gained at least 100 pounds respectively and will not stop gorging themselves on food. At first, I didn't understand, but now that I am older, I know. Food scarcity is traumatizing. I fell in love with my uni best friend who really didn't have any money. When I got a job, for my birthday, I decided to plan a holiday and offered to bring him along. It didn't even occur to me that this was his first ever holiday he'd ever taken. His family could never afford it growing up, and he'd never really thought to do it as an adult. My partner and I are both poor, but different kinds of poor. She's never been homeless or not had enough to eat, while I have. She's extremely frugal and hates buying anything we don't need. I feel a desperate need to stock up if we have any extra money, and it's a fight for me not to fill our house with canned and dry goods in case we don't have enough money to buy food next month for some reason. It makes no sense, but my instinct is to hoard food because there just was never enough of it around growing up. It makes no sense, but my instinct is to hoard food because there just was never enough of it around growing up. That makes perfect sense. I'm from an upper middle class American family and my husband is from a poor SC Asian family. It is hard for me to wrap my head around how poor they really were when he was growing up. He told me about eating only rice with sugar for meals because they couldn't afford meat. They were probably living off less than $0.50 a day for a family of 5 at times. I'm Southeast Asian as well. Rice, soy sauce, eggs and a little vegetables go a long way. I'm not rich at all, but my husband came from a very poor Mexican village. He told me he used to shower outside because there was no in-house plumbing and use leaves as toilet paper. I mean, there's poor, and there's my husband's previous life poor. He's been living in the US for 12 years now, but when we first met it was so interesting seeing life through his childlike eyes. Going to the cinema was a huge event for him. Heating food up in a microwave was a totally foreign concept. And staying at fancy hotels when we went on vacation was like whoa. I still see him surprised by things now and then, and it just reminds me how much I take my middle status class for granted. Hamburger Helper. She hates it because it would be her meal 5x a week growing up. I had never even seen HH before I went to college and love that stuff. 10 for $10 deals are awesome. My so said today I made rent, meaning today I've earned enough, accumulated enough to pay the rent, and I realize that this is a monthly accomplishment to someone with no fixed income salary. Making rent is a huge relief. The other horrible part of having unpredictable income is that when you try to get your financial crap together, all the budgeting advice assumes that you get the same amount each week, or at least close enough to work off an average. It made me feel really hopeless when I was there. One of my exes could pull in a lot of money, easily twice or thrice what I could. He was so incredibly bad at saving this money, down to, say, setting himself up as a company to avoid paying higher rate of tax, but then paying a large amount each month to an accounting company to handle his taxes, which he'd do himself anyway because he didn't trust them to get it right. He'd pay for taxes from one end of the city to another or hire cars rather than use public transport. Flights cancelled, book new ones, never bother to claim back on insurance, buy a sports car, wreck it, sell it for scrap. He'd work contracts and then take time off to work on his own startup, but spend every weekend just going out and buying drugs and booze. I thought it was really fun and wild at first. Haha, money really means nothing to you. But when we became a long-term couple I started feeling like his mother. Man, will you not just fill out the insurance paperwork? Not rich but with a partner who was raised by a teen mom and grew up poor. Sometimes I just want rice and vegetables for dinner. That's a no from her. She won't go back. I was with a girl for a while who grew up in a pretty broken home. Still surprises me just how bad her spending habits are. She racks up credit card debt like it's nothing. She lived in the desert without air conditioning. Damn, that reminds me, when we were kids, my dad got an AC for free from one of his jobs, but we were almost never allowed to use it because of the electric bill. Probably only got to use it if it was like 100 degrees out. Long-term dating. Pets. I was always surprised by the number of pets she and her family had living in the trailer and how much of a share of their income they spent on them. Credit cards were avoided. For me growing up, we were encouraged to get a credit card in our name and use it as much as possible in order to build credit. There was always money to pay it off each month, so it made sense to 1. Build credit and 2. Collect airline miles or whatever the reward was back in the day. When we got together, she always used cash or a debit card. She had a credit card for emergencies and avoided using it otherwise. It took a long time to get her over her aversion skepticism. We were fortunate to have 2 good paying jobs, though it also taught me a healthy appreciation for what it means to have a financial cushion. The logic of buying things on credit that you could buy with cash in order to build a credit score is pretty weird when you think about it. You're basically taking out a loan that you don't need to show you're responsible with money. I dated a 1%er briefly. She was surprised I willingly went inside fast food restaurants. I can answer this one. I did not grow up rich by any means, but I would say my family was upper middle class. My husband was born in Nicaragua and eventually moved to Texas, where his mother barely coped, supporting him and his brother. Some of the things that surprised me. 1. He never eats snacks. Ever. They didn't have food in their kitchen and he would go hungry sometimes. He said once they had an egg in the kitchen and he scrambled it and split it with his brother while his mom hungrily looked on. Now as an adult he doesn't understand snacking. If we eat a banana he thinks that is our next meal. 2. He is very impressed with smaller things in life. He had one toy as a kid, truck, and now, anything I get him he thinks is the most amazing thing in the world. He saves everything. 3. He is the hardest worker I know. He never wants to be where he was. 4. He is the most grateful, optimistic person I know. We've been having some problems. Family drama, trying to sell our house, work stuff, etc. He is not afflicted by any of it. He is cool as a cucumber. He always says, "Did you eat today? Do you have a place to sleep? Does someone love you? Then you are better than most people." I really love him. He makes me see the world in a different, better way. Not super rich by any means, but my husband said he'll always be surprised about the following. How I lived off of $13,000 in 2011. Resiliency to survive financially and pursue my dreams of being the first college graduate. How I didn't know what spinach was or tasted like until our first few dates, in addition to hella other leafy greens. First real date in my 20s. We went to a steakhouse. When the waiter asked me how I wanted my steak, I said cooked. Lol, yikes. Didn't know there was any other way than how my dad cooked steaks. Cheap flat steaks topped with ketchup or ranch dressing. My experience is from the opposite perspective. I was the poor one. It absolutely floored me how my wife acts when something broke, like a car, appliances, clothes, etc. As a child living below the poverty line, replacing a tire or other necessities was a disaster, requiring tricky trade-offs in the budget or just plain acceptance of just how boned you were. When my wife's phone broke, I went into full panic mode while she shrugged and said, "We can just a new one this afternoon." And then we did. He was making good money but came from a poor family. One thing that surprised me was the lack of budgeting. no knowledge of a 401k Roth IRA. Retirement seemed like something that he'd never get to do. So even though he made good money, he was starting to rack up credit card debt. Now he's much better at it than I am. He adores budgeting and looks forward to FIRE. I'm from the poorer family, not super poor, but my in-laws have a stupid amount of money, so by comparison I'm very poor. But I think I can answer for her. We have 2 young kids, and my wife was shocked when I said we should look for clothes and toys for them at local flea markets and garage sales. The idea never occurred to her that we could save money by getting some gently used items. She had never even been to a garage sale in her life. She has grown to love them and now questions whether it is worth it to buy any item new or not before running to Amazon or a store. Her parents think it's disgusting we make our kids wear clothes that another child had before, but they don't pay my bills. Kids outgrow clothes so fast, most of those used clothes are basically new. Wife and I are not poor, not rich by any means either. We definitely hit up the local mom co-ops where moms sell their used baby kids stuff. Find a bunch of good stuff in there, to the point where we feel stupid for buying new because it's so much more expensive. Anyways, it's not even close to being disgusting. I came from a relatively wealthy family, new money. My dad started his own business and grew up poor, and my wife came from a lower income blue collar family. We got married out of college and neither made much money in the beginning. My biggest surprise was how she wanted to spend money. She was shocked when my mom bought her $100 plus pair of jeans for a birthday. She couldn't wrap her mind around spending that much on jeans. But she wanted a motorcycle, for me, which I don't ride in the first place, and then a new furniture set, and then a new bed, and then a new car. She wasn't concerned about savings or retirement, and she never wanted my parents' money for any of it. We are both way too proud of that. It took a long time for her to come around to having an emergency savings account, focusing on debt and not needing the other crap. She eventually realized that her parents wouldn't be in such a terrible situation because their spending habits are horrible. She still has it come out sometimes though. We recently paid off my car and she immediately thought I should get a new car. I grew up with a poor family. I was told credit cards were evil and to never get one by my parents. They had this outlook because they were never taught how to properly use them either. When I finally did have to establish credit and got my first one, I didn't overthink it and just followed the rules and paid it off every month. Then they allowed me more and more credit, more and more cards. An emotionally abusive ex would use my cards for everyday living, promising to pay them off with me. Soon the interest started to snowball and before I knew it I couldn't get out from under it. He ghosted me after 4 years of living together. I was on my own. For about a year I'd get home from work every day and just sob. I was depressed as heck. I met my boyfriend in the midst of all of this. I noticed him always using credit cards and talking about perks and points. He seemed so responsible in the way he used them. It took me a bit to open up to him about my debt, because I was so embarrassed, and it got to the point I felt like there was a weight on my chest 24/7. The late calls, only paying the minimum on each card every month, barely touching the interest. When I finally opened up to him, he sat down with me and said, "We are a team, we'll figure this out together." He helped me go over all of my interest and cards and see what the best option for me was. He offered to pay it all off with his work bonus that year and I pay him back. But we hadn't been together long, and I didn't love him for his money. I didn't even feel comfortable with him paying for dinner often. I knew I had to get out of this myself. One day when I saw him, he gave me an envelope and told me not to open it till I got home. He gifted me $1,000. I did not want to accept it and felt horrible doing so. He told me he hoped it'd help the burden and do with it whatever I wanted, or even something to treat myself since I couldn't do that for so long. I asked him if he minded if I used it to pay for a lawyer to file bankruptcy. He said he'd support me in doing so. I did end up filing. It was scary, but I've never made a better decision in my life. Felt like £1,000 were lifted off my chest. It doesn't directly relate to the amount of money they had, I don't think, but their place was always filthy. I mean, dog crap everywhere. My so lived with his mom sometimes. It would rotate between her and his father and both places were this way. Dishes piled up. Floors were grimy. The place stunk of dog pee and cigarette smoke. One time, I used the bathroom at one of his parents' places and had to spread my feet while sitting on the toilets to avoid stepping in period blood. I mean, it was so disgusting. My sir was baffled when, after we first got married and moved in with each other, every day he would come home to a, generally, I'm not perfect, spotless home. Now, on the flip side, I once dated a guy whose stepfather was a lawyer, so they lived a lavish lifestyle. The only thing that he was surprised about when it came to my lifestyle was that I did not eat pizza with knife, fork, and a glass of wine. Lol. Common now. On the flip side, I once dated a guy whose stepfather was a lawyer, so they lived a lavish lifestyle. The only thing that he was surprised about when it came to my lifestyle was that I did not eat pizza with knife, fork, and a glass of wine. Lol. This sounds like a poor person's simulation of a fancy night out. Lol. This is the payday meow with like in the next 24 hours and money will come your way. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.